Anyway, we got on the Neuralink thing, we're going to talk to someone who is South Africa's premier futurist. I mean, I can say that without any sense of irony or playing it up or playing it down. He's one of the smartest people in the country. He's also the founder of Flux Trends and somebody who we love to check in on from time to time because he's looking at all the things that are going on and analyzing them and trying to make sense of them. He is Dion Chang. And he is also a man who's had 20 experience in the media industry as a journalist and as a media spokesperson. He can provide insights into the ever-changing relationship between brands, consumers, and the communication channels that bind them. But he also has a passion for watching what the youth are up to and finding out what subcultures are growing in various places, as well as a solution-based innovation for the greater good. He's an intrepid traveler, global citizen, and a proud South African. And he's also our guest this morning, Dion Chang. How nice to see you.
Morning.
Yeah, good. How are you?
I'm very well, yeah.
Yeah, so Dion, first of all, it's nice to see you. I know Lebang made it to one of your presentations recently.
Yes.
You did
Mind
a thing.
blown.
Yeah,
Thank
she
you,
was.
thank
She
you.
was. I don't know. You've seen Dion before, right?
Yeah, I have, but not in that setting. I felt like I could like touch you and like really like get into your mind. It was something else because
thank you very
not
much.
enough people are really interested in that way in what is coming.
Yes.
So
They should be.
Exactly, and they should be.
Yes.
They should be.
So Dion, first of all, Flux Trends, it's now been a while, and you guys are firmly established as the people to talk to when you want to understand what could be next and where things are going, and also what the basic flux is in society. Is it heading this way, that way, or the other?
Absolutely, yeah. This is heading into our 17th year now.
Wow.
Okay, for 17
Phenomenal.
years. Yeah, so very proud and very pleased about that.
So there's lots to talk to you about this morning. Chiefly among these things, a lot of people are interested in Gen Z, and I saw this very snide remark from somebody about Gen Z earlier. So I'm gonna read this to you, and we can start on this because maybe this is what kicks off the conversation.
Yes.
Michael says, "What will Gen Z do or bring to the table except woke shit?" So that's a hell of a cynical place to start. But let's talk about Gen Z. So who exactly are, because we need to get these definitions right.
Yeah.
It took me a while to figure out whether I was Gen X or millennial or a bit of both. There are not absolute,
No,
black and white lines here. But Gen Z is roughly from when?
So let's start from the oldest. The oldest are turning about 25 now already.
The oldest Gen Z.
The oldest Gen Z, okay.
They're about 25. So the youngest are sort of early teens getting into that. So I'll just skip ahead because we're already tracking Gen Alpha.
So just hang on. How much space do you give each generation? 20 years? Roughly.
Yeah, roughly about that. So in South Africa, your Gen Zs are your born frees. So,
Okay.
So from 94, so mid 90s. And like I said, so the oldest are 25. So we started tracking this generation about 8 years ago. So long before they started coming of age, or they were just only starting to come of age. And the reason why we were quite fixated, or I'm very fixated on Gen Zs. Or Gen Z, depends which side of the Atlantic you want to be on, is because, so to clarify for people, the first digital natives of humanity.
Yeah.
So the first generation that have known no other world besides Google, besides with smartphones and the internet, which means that brain mapping of learning is completely different.
Sure.
I say in the talks that I do, to parents and to teachers, sorry for you, but you're no longer the font of wisdom. Google is, and if you don't need the old school, literally, of being in a classroom and being taught parrot fashion. Because if you have a curious mind, you will just Google it and you'll find. So there's different ways of learning, which means we're reaching another wave of it with generative AI, ChatGPT, all of those kind of things coming through. That's another way of you're gonna have to learn differently and all of those things. I was really interested in your conversation earlier this morning about tertiary education, because I was doing a little happy dance when I was listening to that, because I've been going on about that since about 2015 when the first fees must fall started rising. And I said, we've picked the right battle, but the wrong war, because you're just getting, it's just that old school mentality. You've got to get that degree. You've got to, and I still hear it so often now, get something as a backup. that backup is so obsolete, at the moment. And so when you were chatting about that, that's exactly what I've been saying to a lot of people. And everyone's like, even 2015, they said, don't you want your engineers and your doctors to have a degree? And I'm like, of course I do, but there's different ways of doing things now. And so my point, going back to the Gen Zs, is when you'll find a very, very strong entrepreneurial, so to that question, so you'll find a very high social justice barometer.
Yeah.
They've been handed damaged everything: politics, economy, social structure, all of those kind of things. So, and you made a comment also about this new cabinet, and what you're starting to see is older people, let's say older leadership, plan very differently to younger leadership. And what makes my heart really sing is that you're starting to see Gen Zs enter politics now at a much earlier age. So compared to the millennials before them, you're starting to see people go to sort of civic duty activism at 17, 18. We have she was then the youngest cabinet minister on the African continent. Her name was Emma Theophilus. She's the deputy ICT minister in Namibia. At 23, she became a deputy minister just before the pandemic hit.
Sure.
So she said it was like a baptism by fire.
Sure. Wow.
But you're getting these things, and then over in America, you've got the first Gen Z in one of the houses, and he's 25 years old. Also, no degree, just a huge passion.
Sure.
And just on that social justice barometer, he has won the seat in, and I think his seat is in Orlando. So it's like a little blue dotted Democrat in the
state of Florida, which is red.
Yeah, red, yeah.
So, I mean, that's interesting, because politically also, there seems to be a lot more depth and variety in Gen Z than there is in the millennials, because actually this term wokeism, woke is kind of a millennial thing. It's not really a Gen Z thing.
No, I think it's been so I play in one of my trend briefings about Gen Zs, I play a little video clip, and it describes it perfectly. So the girl at the end says, millennials might have invented social media, but Gen Z weaponized it. And that's true, and people say, oh yeah, but a few years ago, they're just teenagers, they don't have disposable income, they have all of those kind of things. And I keep saying to our retail clients, I said, yeah, but actually, if you think about it, who actually steers the household budget? Who decides what you're going to eat?
And who are these companies most afraid will say that they're not cool?
Exactly. Yeah.
It's Gen Z.
And so they've been manipulating the family budget all along. And so now that they're coming into the workforce, I say to especially consumer-facing companies, you've got a pincer attack on you, because not only are they your new and very, very difficult, very savvy consumer, but they're also now entering the workforce. So it's a two-pronged attack.
And Dion, when they buy things, it's not just about having a product. They actually care about the values, the process, what the company stands for. And we poo-poo that if you're not in that generation, because you think, oh, what the hell's wrong with you? If you want a phone, it doesn't matter to you if small children in some foreign country are busy putting it together in a sweatshop. But they actually care.
Yeah,
absolutely. It's a huge
or pretend to care on social media. It's hard to tell the difference.
And the thing is that they now might not have that huge disposable income, but they can mobilize. So you see that connectivity, and one of the biggest leveling of playing fields is connectivity. So you don't have to give that generation. You can give them connectivity. You don't have to give them a device. You don't have to explain the technology to them, because the technology isn't technology.
Yeah, sure.
It's how it is.
It's
life and how you do things. So you can really, really sort of make connections. You can mobilize. You can do that, which is why they're saying the influence, obviously maybe not so much the wisdom, but the influence of a Gen Z with that connectivity has the same influence as somebody who's in their 40s or whatever. Wow. You are able to just use that technology.
Dion, I must say, I think it's incredible that, Gen Zs have put themselves in, this position of taking on politics. All that is great. But as a parent, I'll have to be honest, I'm worried, because almost daily, my kids are like, well, mom, you say one thing and Google says another. Aren't there like some challenges or some bad things that we should be aware of now in with regards to the future trends? What are some of the things we should be worrying about?
Obviously,
as parents?
with that connectivity comes obsession with devices and being online. And if you work backwards, that's the Silicon Valley business model. It's eyeball time, so it's to keep you, which is why we make this comparison of changing lanes in careers, because you never know where your skills are going to land up. So just on that topic, one of the most surprising poaching mechanisms in Silicon Valley for the past decade or so has been casino slot machine designers for tech companies. Yeah, everyone goes,
that's
what?
Interesting.
Right. So when I do a presentation, I put slot machines up on the screen, and then I put your homepage of your smartphone there. And who better to know how to keep you on your phone than somebody that designs slot machines?
It's literally, and that's you swiping. I get it.
It's got lights. Yes. It's got different colors. It's got haptic effects. Yes. It's got vibrations. It's got all of those kind of things. And then suddenly you put it together. You go, aha!
They're playing us.
That's why there's this whole pushback. The EU is about trying to ban TikTok. America this week is about to go into this huge ruling whether they can or can't do that.
Oh no, we're gonna lose a whole tribe of people who've told us they're influencers. What are we gonna do without them? How will we survive?
Yeah.
So Dion, can I ask you about this before we move on to other things? The chief identification here in the mind of a Gen Z or Z kid is the difference and distinction between the real world and the virtual, and those becoming a little more blurred as time goes by. So sometimes they're very different. You have people who are essentially living their life as an avatar. And I mean, we could talk about whether that's healthy or unhealthy, because it's clear to some people that there are good and bad things about it. But it also occurs to me that these things we're still figuring it out. We don't know yet what the psychological implications of this in the long term will be. And they may be quite detrimental in many respects. We already know that relationships are much harder for Gen Z than they were for millennials, than they were for the previous generations before that. It was easier for people to connect in a real sense. Yes. It's easier for Gen Z to connect online, virtually, but they find themselves a bit stuck when they're actually face-to-face with people. Depression and anxiety are sky high. Suicidality is becoming a problem.
Sure.
So overall, there are things to be worried about here. But how do you, when you're speaking to and about these Gen Z people, how do you figure the virtual versus the real?
Yeah, that's quite it is a difficult one because it is blurring a lot. So if you start thinking, even your younger Gen Zs who's starting to game, parents quite a while back were starting to scratch their heads because they were spending more money on avatar skins than fast fashion.
We still are.
Some very clever brands have actually built. This is hard to get even my own head wrapped around. A little. It's one of your big fast fashion brands that they've created Loop Island in one of the games, where you can recycle your avatar skins, so you can go in and it's embedding that message to say, can they, and they've got your a sustainability influencer who does the real life thing, but then you can go into Loop Island.
Of course, it's all nonsense though, because there's no real sustainability issue.
Yeah, exactly.
There's just disconnected from reality
for everything. So you go,
but it's essentially like it's a swap shop.
It's a swap shop, and you can do things. So brands are starting to be able to build things in there. You can build your own little retail. It's really, really clever. So they say, here's your access to our inventory. You create a little shop in the metaverse, and you can stock it up with there. So you play with their stock, but you kind of just get more and more ingrained, into it. And there's a reason why all of your really, really high-end luxury brands, especially like a Gucci or something like that have gone full throttle for this generation. And you're thinking, but they can't afford this stuff. And you're going, no, but it's a long game. We'll get you hooked in, we'll get you brand aligned, and then when you eventually can buy something, then you will have that automatic loyalty to to our brand, and we'll make it really interesting for you to be able to do that.
But again, we're talking now about consumer trends.
Yes.
My concern is more, how do we understand and make sense of the virtual and the real when we're talking to these people?
Yeah. So, as you said, there's a lot of mental wellness issues about this. So in terms of even the relationships,
because it creates cognitive dissonance.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's the real world in which you are required to actually be able to speak to people and interact normally with people and provide some kind of product or service in the real world in order to have a purpose.
Sure.
And then there's the virtual world where you can make it all up on a daily basis and change your mind about it on a daily basis.
Yes, absolutely. So the one little signifier, so we always put little bellwethers into our work just to make sure that we know that what we're tracking is actually happening. And so the little bellwether. So one of the bellwethers and a big thing at the moment are situationships. Okay. So you're not in a relationship. So it's that in between, which sort of is a bit of indicative of what you were saying. Is like, so people aren't quite sure, we're not there yet, and so we'll just kind of
just vibes,
see where it is, and we'll have the situationship until maybe we'll commit. It starts spiraling into a really interesting thing, because now what we're starting to see are people getting into situationships because the economies around the world are so bad. So people getting into situationships to hook up, so not intimately, but for economic reasons and budget. So we'll hook up and we'll share place. So you're kind of roomies, but you're more than roomies. So that's why the situationships are like a weird.
It sounds so unhealthy.
It's just
sounds toxic.
It's kind of there, but we're being forced into these kind of things. So and it's not just this Gen Z thing. The other little catchphrase that we've picked up a couple of past weeks are boom mates. So these are baby boomers, so really older people who are starting to say, well, I didn't save enough for my retirement, so we'll also hook up and we'll become boom mates because we can't afford.
But like old people who can't afford to live,
so
you'll
have to become roomies.
There's no difference between that and the situationships.
So exactly. So
that's not generational. That's interesting.
Tinder for old people.
Yeah,
that's what I'm getting.
So in our latest briefing that we do at the beginning of every year, this is called the state we're in. I call it the great unraveling and the rise of the machines, because things are starting to unravel, and then you have to use that very lovely Afrikaans word, because it's the only one with the best mouthfeel that you say dit ontrafel. Things are on. It's got that nice mouthy feel that it's unraveling.
Sure.
And you're starting to see that. So it's you could argue that, okay, these are the kicks of the dying horse, and we are going from old systems to new systems. And please, that we are moving that into the new cabinet.
The state we're in is, I mean, this is fascinating stuff. So I've read a lot about this from you, and the key themes that you talk about here are technology, retail, economy, the natural world, diplomacy, and socio-cultural.
Yes.
Trends.
So, I mean, we don't want to go and spend too much time on technology, even though everybody in the world's talking about AI. Most of us have tried ChatGPT. We've asked it to do all kinds of things for us. I've been amazed at some of the results and underwhelmed at some of the others. It seems like a great first draft at things. It seems like another really useful tool to take all of this incomprehensible and varied and complex information that we're surrounded by and to distill it into something a little more useful. That's great. But there's other stuff going on too. People have been talking for the longest time about this immersive virtual reality and all the rest of it. But, even with the headsets and things, it doesn't really feel like that's happening as fast as people thought it would. There's some senses that they'll just never figure out a virtual representation of. I mean, smell's going to be extremely complicated, touch as well. So what are the things that the technology people are most excited about? Because I always wait for an update on my phone thinking it's going to be able to allow me to teleport and God knows what else. We've got to be realistic. There's a law of diminishing returns that's coming in with a lot of the devices that we've grown up with, right?
So what we're tracking, so just in terms of ChatGPT, so the term is generative AI, but people are saying you should actually just call it generative tech, because AI is only one component of that. So what we're tracking at the moment are going to be very, very interesting legal issues. So at the moment, there's a lawsuit between a company called Stability AI and Gallo and Getty Images. So everyone's talking about ChatGPT. So that's just sort of generating your text and everything. This is text to to image.
Right.
So you're starting to see, and people, and the reason why Gareth and Getty are saying, well, if generative AI scours what's in cyberspace for that, then you can't take those images because there's copyright on that.
Okay.
The next step already is music industry.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if you've seen a clip with David Guetta, and what he's done is, he took, he said, write me something in Eminem style, and then he took Eminem's voice, and then he played it out to a crowd. They went ballistic, and he just said, gosh, that really worked out well.
And Eminem had nothing to do with it.
And he had nothing to do with it.
It's using his intellectual property or his intellectual identity. Let's not say property, because these are not songs that have been written before.
Sure,
But you could also, if you look on the internet, there's some terrifying movies of guys who are busy overlaying essentially generated voices of other people.
Yeah.
Indistinguishable from the original.
Yeah.
But it's me talking, and yet I'm talking like Leonardo DiCaprio
Yes.
and then Arnold Schwarzenegger and everything else, which I was doing before, but at least I was doing it myself.
They've caught up
This is now the machine that's doing it.
So your
right?
deep fakes are becoming
these deep fakes are frightening.
easier
Scary.
and also more commercialized. So you're getting daily just really quick commercial applications you just put in, and you can say, I want to do that. And then in the film world, they're saying, so this is also another problem, is they're saying, okay, we want Harrison Ford to be the young Indiana Jones, so we'll just use AI and we'll just put, give him an extra 20 years back, and then we can do that.
And hologram concerts.
Yeah.
I mean, they've done this with Tupac already.
So
right?
to your point, Gareth, I think, so for me, I am excited and terrified about generative AI. But I want to just point out to everybody listening is that everyone's fixated about ChatGPT-3 at the moment, which kind of just at the beginning of the year went on everybody's radar. Everybody tried to get onto it. But a lot of people don't know that ChatGPT-3 was actually launched in 2020. So 3 years old. ChatGPT-2 was launched in 2019. ChatGPT-4 is going to be launched in about 18 months' time. So I haven't got the figures with me, but ChatGPT-3 has something like 170-something million parameters, they call it. So these are like connections that you can make. ChatGPT-4 will have something, I don't know what the correct number, something trillion parameters, which very coincidentally is the same number of synapses the human brain has.
Damn.
So in 18 months' time, that's when I'm going to be really interested to see and terrified where this goes, because you're going to have a generative AI which has the same synapses as a human brain.
This is the singularity.
Like all these movies have predicted.
Exactly.
It's I Am Legend was right.
Well,
so we're getting into that. And then just to go back to the blurring of lines. So I was doing this sort of executive thing, and luckily one of the ladies said, she said, no, the metaverse does make sense for me. He said, because my daughter went on her first metaverse date.
Don't say date. Oh.
But so Lebang, so this will make you, maybe this will make you a bit pleased. She said, firstly, she wanted her hair and makeup done, and she wanted a new outfit. She said it was much cheaper to do it virtually.
Okay.
Just buy a skin and get your avatar to have the hair and makeup done.
Yeah.
And she said the best thing about the whole date was that my daughter was sitting next to me.
So she was in on it.
So there was no hanky-panky.
This is all so unhealthy, though. Oh my God, this is so
scary,
unhealthy.
Right? It doesn't sound real for us, but for them, it's so real.
It's absolutely real. But and then Gareth, so this is why I like what we do, because you get these sort of weird anomalies and then inconsistencies coming up. So we picked up yesterday. We have these sort of big weekly meetings and think tanks where we discuss a lot of things. And it's a new TikTok thing called body doubling. Okay?
This sounds dangerous.
No, so it's so random and so weird. So you put a camera there while you're working, and so that you can stream to people and you just work. And then now and again, you turn to the camera and you answer a comment or whatever. So it's like trying to make the reconnections if you're working remotely of having people around you. Except it's not only your office colleagues, it's like you're beaming
world
out there. So it's getting a little
so
bit
essentially people are just watching you work.
Yeah.
You've got to ask who the people are who are watching you work.
And people will watch, Gareth. Like for us,
know.
it sounds weird, but
I
there's
know.
people that are interested in just sitting and watching you live. It's people watching, but just in
Yeah.
your
And you
hand,
see,
in your phone.
I struggled in the beginning, but I eventually understood why people would watch someone game, for example. If someone's playing a game and they do it really well, it's fun to watch, right? That's why we watch sport, essentially. So that's not so different.
Yeah.
I wonder if this is actually sucking the soul out of some people, because as I mentioned earlier, it is making them a little more desperate.
Yeah.
It is making them unhappy. Despite all of this freedom and all of this information and all of the things we were promised, it tends to have exactly the opposite, counterintuitively, the opposite effect on people, on their psyche, on their emotional well-being, their mental health. This is proof positive to me that we are still unevolved apes, and that we actually need proximity to people. We need community. We need touch. We need these very, very primal things. And if we don't have them, it doesn't matter how evolved we think we are or how digitally native we are. Essentially, we will become less and less happy and less fulfilled as human beings if we carry on down this path without any inhibitors.
But you do see, so to give you a flip side of that, you are starting to see that some, not all. So of course, when we're talking about generation demographics, it's very, very broad and very generalized. But you do see that quite a lot of Gen Zs are self-correcting as well.
Are they?
So it's like, I need to step away from the devices. So parents worry about cyberbullying, all of that. These guys bear the brunt of that. So they know when you need to draw that line and say, okay, enough. I can't do that. And you see the little sort of blips on our trend radar, that people start bailing out of social media, and then because it just becomes too toxic as well. So you do get that sort of recalibration.
I'll tell you what, that's intergenerational as well, because I think a lot of people have started to see that most of it is just actually quite bad for you.
Dion, how are we looking with Gen Alpha? I mean, I know you touched on that, you guys are looking into, like, I have kids that are within that category. I mean, I have kids in every category now that I think of it. But what are some of the already noticeable trends that you guys have picked up about them? Because they are almost zero human life and just tech as their basis. And that freaks me out.
Yeah, absolutely. I was having a chat with somebody on the weekend, and they said there's an 8-month-old in the family, and every time she sees the phone, she's like, give me the phone. Give me the phone. It's like Lord of the Rings. Like, give me the ring. Give me the ring. So there's not a lot, because they're still toddlers, that we can figure out. But what is kind of weird and kind of raise an eyebrow to it. So there's a lot of companies already targeting Generation Alpha.
Okay.
So you can learn fintech stuff and everything. So they're going through. So just for the listeners, just to clarify, Generation Alpha are the kids of the Millennials.
Yes.
So they're the offspring of the Millennials, and that in itself does a whole lot of different filters into what that generation is going to turn out to be.
Sure.
So your millennial parents are the first generation of parents who are happy to have a digital nanny, i.e. a screen, and the main tutor on that is YouTube.
Sure.
So YouTube is your new kindergarten, and that's what Generation Alpha are kind of growing up on.
Coco Melon and Baby Shark.
Yes. Yeah. So if we think that Gen Zs are screen obsessed, then we've got another thing coming with Gen Alpha. And if the younger Gen Zs are already starting to go on dates in the metaverse, then where will Gen Alpha land up and do those kind of things?
What is, speaking of companies targeting these Gen Alpha children, these are children.
Yeah.
What is dark advertising?
Dark advertising, that's so the whole thing with our statement this year is about the role of AI in very, very different things. So whether it's in politics, in the N for natural world, so you've got something called disaster relief by algorithms. So they pay you out. If your area is hit by a hurricane or something like that, they don't even wait for you to claim money. They'll just say, we know that your village was wiped out. Here's money because we know that. So dark advertising it's really, really stealthy. So a lot of things people are seeing online would be dark advertising. They don't know it. So it's specifically because your algorithms are so sophisticated, they will target you at a certain time of day, at a certain time, when
almost
you are ripe for
subconscious.
that. Yeah. But the dark advertising then disappears. So it's transient. So you will see it. You will even go back to that company's homepage, but you won't see that because it's been targeted specifically for you, and it's transient. But it will nudge you. It'll keep nudging you towards something. And usually the dark advertising will have a little, buy me button or find out more button and everything like that. So you don't really know that it's there, but it just keeps nudging. And then, so just a link to that is a kind of a new category of virtual product placement. So this is just kind of all of these subconscious nudgings that you're getting. So virtual product placement is not new within movies, in all that. You put a box of cereal, all of those kind of things. What the beauty of technology does now is virtual product placement means that you can, in post-production, so you don't even have to have that product there while you're filming it. You insert that into the program, and then you insert it at a certain time of day for a certain audience there. And then for the advertiser, it is really, really good because you can remonetize a certain piece of content. So if you've got a soap opera or whatever, you can keep remonetizing that and
different products.
And if it's replayed, you put a different product in. If it's played at a certain, in the evening or the weekend, you'll put a different product in, and you can insert all of that there. So it's a bit like, it's like the deep fake of advertising. So you can put that product in when you least expect it. And so they said, over 50% of things that you thought you were going there, you've probably seen it on some dark advertising. And it's gone, and
all of this
in your head.
And all of this is happening in a world where people are increasingly unsure of whether what they're seeing is to be believed.
Sure.
I mean, this is the problem. Like we live in a world of fake news.
Yes.
And people are already questioning basic things. I mean, there were always crazy people who thought the earth was flat and that kind of thing. But now there are conspiracy theorists who have been vindicated in all kinds of really important ways. And there are people who are actively participating in propaganda, which is designed to confuse people. And I think, there are still things that are real and there are things that are fake. And it's becoming very, very difficult for some people to distinguish between the two.
And this is the big danger of generative AI. Is because if you think about what generative AI does, it scours cyberspace for things. It's just like Google. It's kind of what's there. Google gives you some options and things. But I think what people really need to be aware of is, although it will, write your essay for you, it will also take things that are fake news and put it there. So if you don't double check yourself. So the whole thing with in education, so the big knee-jerk reaction was, oh no, all the sort of students, learners are going to be cribbing and they're going to be using that. Well, for every reaction there is another reaction. There's a whole lot of new software out that can just scan your stuff and say this was written by a machine, it wasn't written by you. So that's one thing. The second thing is, this is in the States, is they found out that teachers are using generative AI and ChatGPT more than the students really are. So they're saying, give me a really difficult assignment on this, and this, and this. What should I do that? And what they're saying is fundamentally, it is, again, so it's another cycle of changing the education system. So you are now engaging people who will probably be using ChatGPT, but then you're saying, so you're not teaching people, how do you interrogate that? How do you have critical thinking? How do you question? How do you do all of those kind of things? So don't try and throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, don't use this because people are going to use it. But how do you use it, and how do you make it more challenging?
I feel like we've been down this road with hackers.
Yeah.
I feel like we got, in the beginning, hackers were terrifying and everybody was, we've got to make sure we can find out who the hackers are and put them in jail. Then people started hiring the hackers to figure out how to make better programs and apps and so on, and also figure out where the holes in their systems were.
Yes.
And then the hackers eventually became the people who wrote the best programs.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to get to a stage with ChatGPT and other AI like this as well. But let's just look at one or two other things here. We talk a bit about diplomacy and the natural world, and maybe this deserves a bit of comment because it's not just about the attitudes of Gen Z or Gen Alpha, but it's also about the people who are currently in charge, who are sometimes widely disconnected
Sure.
from these younger people.
Very, very much so. And I think you were mentioning it earlier today about your cabinet, all of those things, and fundamentally, I've said it before, is older leadership plan very differently to younger leadership, because you it's like, okay, well, I've got another maybe 5 years in office or whatever,
right? 5 years to live.
Whereas your younger politicians, and you can kind of see it where we're seeing it in South Africa. They're not Gen Zs, but you've got millennials sort of in mayoral positions, everything, and they're starting to push very differently to like you said, old ideas, and just like rely on all of that. So, but what is really dangerous, and that goes back to your fake news thing as well, is we're seeing a veering off, a big ontrafeling in terms of politics, going very much towards right wing. So it's not only just extremists.
This is Gen Z now?
No, just generally.
Oh, generally.
We're talking generally.
Well, isn't this just a reaction to the reaction of the left, which has been kind of the way it's been going for the last 10 years?
Yes and no, because it's interesting. I read a really interesting paper that said the whole argument about we going left and right is not fundamentally where it's
because you
at.
can see what happened with Orban in Hungary. You could see what happened with Bolsonaro in Brazil.
But what is essentially happening, and this is what does worry me, is the ontrafeling, is that fundamentally democracy is based on some degree of equity in society. So there's some equilibrium, and there's not that there's no inequality, but the inequality is not that vast. What we're now starting to see in the world is inequality just starting to become this gulf and this canyon. Yeah,
absolutely.
And so the leaning more towards right wing, and the reason why right wing governments are being, specifically in Europe, being sworn in, and like Italy,
winning elections,
and winning elections, is people are being disgruntled, and this is why I say it's a real, not only a red flag, it's just like hundreds of red flags for South Africa, because you're starting to see that people around the world are saying it's not left or right wing, but it's, I want an alternative because I'm not getting what I thought I was.
It's almost just like a kicking the machine because you're unhappy with the results. So it's kind of like you see, a lot of people who are just opting out of the system in this country, because they're just so dissatisfied, and they're saying, well, anarchy is preferable.
So I see it on the road. I've been trying to collect these things. So there's two things. So one, we've got branded filled potholes. So you get private sector doing that, and then on the other hand, you've got this guerrilla graffiti artists that are going around to all the potholes, spraying ANC in vivid green, all the things. So it's just like potholes are a good illustration of like where the South African psyche is, and it is wrong. But that whole not left, not right wing, but just a dissatisfaction that our society is becoming so unequal.
Well, I mean, that's why they say, for example, that a Bernie Sanders supporter has more in common with a Donald Trump supporter than anything in between. And that just shows you that at both ends of the spectrum, there is massive dissatisfaction. But this inequality thing, I mean, it's ironic then that the people who are the most privileged in society, the people who go to things like the World Economic Forum, are so out of touch with what ordinary people want. And they seem to be becoming less and less in touch with that stuff. And they're almost proud of it.
It is. And I think that's
and the hatred ordinary people have for those elites is like it's never been before.
So like I said, it's not the left and right, it's the them and us. It's like the 1%, which over the pandemic has become the 0.5%. And the rest are just, so the last year we were already talking about the middle class mirage, because it doesn't exist.
It's falling apart, right?
It's melted away. And you've got the extreme wealthy, and then you've got people that are just, I think South Africa, we need to kind of just be a bit thankful that we're a very patient lot. But we've seen in KZN, and where that uprising, that's where it can go, that little spark. And we wait for winters of discontent in South Africa, because that's kind of strike season, and
well,
where does that go?
Yes, but I mean, even that, there's kind of also a bit of apathy, which I'm sure you've picked up on. is that people are unhappy, but they'll sit and moan about it online or at dinner parties, but they won't actually get
They
up and
won't
go.
do anything about
I mean, like
it.
the last major march we saw, ironically, was the DAs of all things, which is so perverse compared to like where we were. The trade union can barely scrape together 20 people to go and protest in a trade union march. They used to fill the streets of Johannesburg in the 80s and 90s. And now the only people who can get a march together are the main opposition party, which is like largely not the most disenchanted, disaffected, and most impoverished people.
Well,
I'm making generalizations.
If your supply chain is disrupted to such an extent you can't get your latte, then you get really angry.
Well, I mean, this is another thing, and I mean, America sort of leads the way here still, and maybe that's also something worth discussing, because China has been touted as this place that everything's going to change from, and China's got massive, massive internal problems at the moment.
Yeah.
They've got a hugely imbalanced population. Chinese young people are not having children.
Yeah.
There's a big fallout coming there. They're paying pensions of much, much older people who are, and they're calling themselves the last generation.
Yeah, they've lost just because this year's trend briefing we've done a lot about demographics.
Yeah.
And China just lost 40 million workers because they're in an aging population.
And they're not being replaced.
In April, India will overtake China as the most populous
country in the world.
And that's really important because there's also a very, very young generation, very much like the African continent's a Gen Z country. There's a lot of young people there. I think like 1 in 5 of the world are actually young Indians.
Yeah.
But these young Indians they all started sort of coming of age after in the 1960s when the economy kind of recalibrated and kind of went more open to the world. So they said you've got the largest bank of knowledge workers in India and good education as well.
Absolutely.
And watch that workforce then come out, because then everything becomes more remote, everything like that. Already you've got call centers in India, all of that kind of thing.
Sure.
So when this starts happening, so in the next 2 years or so, when that demographic and that country just starts becoming the most populous country in the world, and you've got a really good thing, as you said, the younger Chinese are saying that's the lying flat movement. I'm not going to hustle. I don't want all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Then there's going to be a very sort of a different play. And then at the same time, America's just sort of sliding and sliding and sliding and sliding. It's just it's kind of losing the plot.
Navel gazing. It's just nothing's happening.
Yesterday's just when I closed my laptop last night, the one headline came up that the state of Tennessee, one of 14 states, but the state of Tennessee was the first state to ban drag shows. So it's like
for children.
Yeah, it's like
for children.
That's.
I think it matters that it's for children.
Yeah.
I mean, there's still drag shows, but I mean, this is America's got into arguments about unimportant things
exactly
that affect tiny, tiny percentages of their population, because they've been living in excess for a long time.
Yeah.
I mean, generally, obviously, there are lots of miserable and poor Americans, and they've got a massive opioid crisis as well, which is possibly contributing to this.
Yeah.
But these are small things in a world where, for example, India will end up being the country that supplies all the smart people in all the professions across the world. They'll just wash across the world. And this is important, but America's busy worrying about which bathroom who goes into, right?
Dion, when I saw you last month, one of the things that stood out for me the most was this very TikTok thing that's happening in America. Gareth, you know that the TikTok that Americans are fed versus the TikTok that is fed that's is two different TikToks. I want to know what you think is going to happen. Do you think they're going to win this one?
I think the kind of scaremongering in America is to such a degree that they probably will pass this. And
well, they've already banned it in government departments, for example.
So federal devices,
I mean,
you can't do that,
it's run by the Chinese Communist Party. They've funded it. They're programming it. They're using it as an information gathering exercise.
If it was just America, then I would say maybe it's just a drop in. It's just like a little blimp on the radar.
Sure.
But the EU is doing the same thing. And different countries around the world are also now starting to ban any surveillance technology that comes out of China. So there's this it's like a growing thing around the world, but the TikTok thing is one thing, and that's why they, it also was an attempt to try and rewrite that, to put that 60 minutes limit
the limit on a day,
on TikTok.
But interestingly enough, you hinted at this already. In China, if you're a child and you go onto TikTok, or if you're anything under, I think, 25, they only serve up education, science, mathematics, history,
all the good stuff,
you know, stuff that will make you smarter.
Yes,
not people dancing.
And it's limited to, for your preteens, it's limited to 40 minutes there. So what Lebang's referring to is it's if anybody listening, just Google spinach versus opium TikTok, and you'll see this on YouTube. And essentially, what this guy was saying, and that sends a shiver down all parents' spines.
I'm shaking.
Was they said they had a preteen survey in China and in America, and they said, what is your greatest ambition? In America, it was influencer. So this is all your teens. In China was, I want to be like a space
astronaut
or
scientist,
like And what that guy said was, I don't have to tell you, if you just keep this going for another generation or so, what the world's going to start looking like from there. So
absolutely. Well, bad things happen because you deserve them. Well, in this case, I mean, you've got to blame the politicians and you've got to blame parents.
Definitely. We need to take responsibility as the parents as well. Put those limits on the screen times. You have to manage how much your kids are consuming, because we're moving into a space of, well, it's not my fault. The schools aren't doing enough, or the internet's doing this. What are you doing as the parent? Because it starts in the household.
No one's going to do that for you.
Exactly. Take responsibility, parents.
It's not in the interests of Google, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, or Snapchat to look after your child.
Exactly.
They would rather have your child married to the screen for the rest of their lives.
They will build an island inside a game so that you can fork out money for your child to wear a Gucci skin at the age of 3. And that is bizarre.
And then feed you more dark advertising.
So this dystopian update was brought to you by Flux Trends. No, Dion, it's always great to have you here. And there's a lot that I think many people have learned from this. People are saying, oh my God, how amazing. Where can we find out more? I've given your handle on social media, but perhaps you can just direct people to where exactly your report is, in case they want to see it, particularly those parents who are going to be paranoid after this.
No, if you just go to fluxtrends.com, there's there's things you can sign up for. We call them little observations, and we send things out to it weekly. It's just kind of what we discuss in the office, which I think is quite, because look, all of our work is for corporates and for big companies. So we try and put out what we discussed and what we like putting there, and what you came to was also like a public event where we show what the research is that we actually want to do and like as well. So
it was so informative. It was like, I've been to a lot of events, but that one I was like, I need this, and I invited the whole team to the next one. Every month you guys do something like that, and we need that.
Well, subscribe and go and check out the website. It's really worth it. Thank you, Dion. Always great to have you, and I hope we get some more info out of you very, very soon, because this has left people wanting more.
Yeah, and if you want to know more about teenagers, we're your hub. And we're going to be launching a little tour later on so that we can understand what's in the brains of Gen Zs.
Nice.
If there's anything left.
Gareth.
All right, everybody. Have a happy day. We'll see you tomorrow at 6 a.m. Thank you, Dion. Thank you, Lebang.